It's almost midnight, Watchers. Are you ready to join the Midnight Watchers to talk about their favorite strange and scary movies?
Alrighty, welcome. This is Koji,
And this is Quentin.
And I'm Jennifer.
and this is the Midnight Watchers. And we were supposed to be on Zoom, but we're supposed to be on person, but we're on Zoom, as you guys can see. And we're going to be talking about the 1972 classic Dracula A.D. But before we get to that, how are you guys?
I'm good. I'm sorry. It was supposed to be, there's some interesting COVID scare going on here, so to say the least.
And Jennifer, how are you as you drink your coffee?
Yeah, having coffee. I'm doing good. I'm sad there may not be a real Halloween necessarily. Like, what is the situation? Like, I love Halloween every year. I love getting dressed up. I always go to Santa Monica Boulevard or like a party or two. So, yeah, I'm just adjusting. This is going to be a different holiday season this year for everyone.
Yeah. In South Pasadena, where I live, Halloween is huge. I mean, we give out like $300 to $400 worth of candy every Halloween because there's so many people just lined up like down the streets. And so it's going to be different and interesting to not be bombarded by people trying to get Halloween candy. Because actually, the streets around me, one of the streets is actually the one with Michael Myers' house from the original. So they on that street, they close off the street and they have like haunted houses and they have this huge thing. And I'm like where everybody parks. So as everyone walks to that street, they stop off at my house. And during Halloween, we just sit outside the house because I don't want people ringing the doorbell like a million times. So we just sit outside and just pass out candy for like 3 or 4 hours. And then and at some point when I run out of candy, I'm like, that's too much candy. I don't want to give out anymore because it's like so much money to spend on, people.
Theoretically, if you're doing outdoors, it should be safe, actually.
Yeah, but I think they're not doing it in South Pass. But although the best Halloween story I have is I used to give out coffee to parents. I make coffee for people, and then this one parent complained and asked me if they had like soy milk.
Oh my
gosh. I was like, this is free, and she was just complaining about it. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm done.
That's horrible.
I was like, I'm trying to be nice to the parents, and they were just being, really, they wanted more. But anyway, so let's get into it. So I'll read the description. I'll read a little bit about it, and then we'll talk about it as usual. So Van Helsing dispatches Dracula to his grave, only for the Dark Lord to be reborn in 1972. When the swinging trendies of London decide to experiment with a little devil worshipping, the Count decides to move to his own bloody groove. I think that's a funny description, by the way. Release date was November 17th, 1972. It was directed by Alan Gibson. It was written by Don Houghton and stars Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, Stephanie Beacham, and a couple of reviews I saw that were interesting. Roger Ebert gave it only 1 of 4 stars. And this guy named Clyde Jevons from the Monthly Film Bulletin, he said it was unintentionally funny. But over the time, I think it's gotten better reviews over the time. So Tim Burton at one point claimed it to be among his favorite films. And English author, film critic, and horror expert Kim Newman chose it as one of his top 10 vampire movies of all time. And in the 2020 BBC Netflix Dracula miniseries, the 3rd episode is itself an homage to the film, taking place in present day. It also includes references to it along with many other Hammer Dracula films. So that's a little bit about it. So Quentin, since you chose this movie, why don't you tell us a little bit about why you chose it?
Well, I mean, why I chose this movie was because it's a stereotypical Hammer film, because Hammer's been making a lot of horror films and mostly based on Dracula. And I believe the last film they made was Dracula Rises Again, right? Could it be? And so basically Van Helsing killed Dracula, and then Hammer actually brought Dracula to the modern era with Dracula A.D. So this is the first modernized version of Dracula ever. So that's why it's important, because like after that you have Dracula 8, you have Dracula 2000, you have Dracula 3000, and the Dracula character became modernized after this film.
Jennifer, what did you think of this movie?
Yeah, that is pretty important. This was the first sort of present day or modern adaptation of the story. What review were you reading that was saying that it was an unintentionally funny? That's exactly what I was gonna bring up about this movie. It was that it made me laugh. Like I was smiling and like giggling to myself, and it was like funny, but in a good way. Not like it's so bad. Wasn't like it was so bad it's funny. It was like it was funny, like it's just a little camp and just like sometimes the looks on their faces or
Yeah, things like she's a bit drained, I'm in for a bite. Those are things I wrote as unintentionally funny lines. I wondered that though, Jennifer. I was wondering if it was unintentional or it was intentional because it was kind of over the top, and I wasn't sure if that was the way they intended it or they were going for it.
I'm pretty sure it's intentional because that was the beginning of that kind of like writing of like having those one-liners. If you look at all the James Bond movies back in the 70s, which is pretty much the beginning of the Rocky Moore era, right? Where there's always James Bond always cracks this kind of one-line joke, you know, say something like, I don't know, oh, you blah blah. There's always these one-line jokes, and I guess the writing at that time with the British writers, they tend to want to write certain genres like that. Like for example, James Bond and again like Dracula is very much like kind of like a superhero or super anti-hero kind of figure, right? Kind of like a James Bond. So I feel like it's that kind of writing era back in the, you know, early 70s all the way up to the late 90s, late 80s. And then I guess the P.S. Brosnan James Bond was what, 1989 or something? Sorry, the 90s started to make James Bond a little bit more serious. And now with the new James Bond, they completely don't do those kind of one-liners anymore.
Well, Quentin, why don't you tell us about what's your favorite part of the movie?
My favorite part of the movie was probably like that party, 70s party scene. I just thought that was really cool, right? It's just like, you know, there's just like all these people, and it's kind of done in like a tongue-in-cheek kind of way, but still very enjoyable and campy, you know. I mean, that's a very much sensibility that I missed from the sort of like 70s, 80s horror film, kind of like all like James Bond movies or the Roger Moore James Bond. That's like kind of campy, you know, and silly, but at the same time, it's kind of fun.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite parts of the movie is that I felt like it didn't take itself seriously. I felt like it was kind of having fun, not at itself, but it was just a fun movie, and I was laughing and the entire time. Jennifer, you look like you want to say something.
I kind of loved that part of it too, like the fact that it was set in the 70s and seeing the vibe and the, you know, London in the 70s and like their outfits and then the cars and the music. Yeah, that was like a really enjoyable part. And I think that was kind of my way of summing up this movie is, to me, I thought it was like just fun. It's like a fun movie, you know, not super profound, but like even the, what's the actor's name? He's the one that is like honoring the legend of Dracula, right? Sort of
he's the young kind of assistant guy. Right. Yeah, his performance and everything was just so funny. I don't know, it's just like, this is so fun, and because he was so committed to his like quest and that whole like ritual scene and getting his friends to go along with, yeah, let's do some occult, let's have an occult sort of seance party. And it was just so, it was funny. It was really fun. And I feel like it made sense that they would try to bring back Dracula or bring back, you know, a spirit or whatever, because yeah, it's the 70s where people were like very free thinking about psychedelics and partying and free love and stuff. So it was like a perfect era for this setup.
Yeah, I think it was one of the things I kept thinking about this in the whole movie was, you know, if people watch movies now or of now 30 years from now, will we look like that? You know, because I don't think we look that way, but I guess
you didn't think we looked that way in the 70s.
No, in the 70s, no, that in the 70s they look so like the way they dress and the way they talk is like, it's like so different. I just wonder, like I always wonder about like how trippy it is that 30 years later we watch it and it feels so weird and so different. They look so different and they act so different. And it's just hard for me to imagine that, you know, when people look back now, which will probably be definitely the same way, that that it's so different. I guess it's just because 30 years is not a long time in history, but it is a long
50
time.
years ago.
Oh, that's right.
2020. We're not 2000 anymore. 50 years ago.
Sorry, 50 years ago. So it is, I guess, a while ago, but it just feels like, it doesn't feel like that long ago, I guess, because I was born in the 70s or late 70s. Well, Quentin, how does this, is this really the first movie that Dracula was in the modern day?
Yes.
I feel
that's historically is the first movie that brought the Dracula character into the 20th century.
Why wasn't there any movies before that?
There was not before Dracula A.D. 1972. All the Draculas were made as a period piece.
Interesting.
And then so this movie was kind of revolutionary in the way that it sort of like transported the Dracula myth to modern era and opened up like basically interpretations and adaptations for the rest of how we're bringing, you know, vampires into the modern era, right? So I think after that, I mean, after Dracula A.D., I think the big vampire kind of like the big vampire revolution is definitely like, you know, Anne Rice's, right? So the Interview with the Vampire, which is sort of this seminal novel that sort of brought this kind of like new dimension to vampires, because back before like Anne Rice and all the vampires movie I've seen would be like basically they're all evil people and circus of vampires, like, you know, this non-stop vampire movies that are being made, and they're just kind of like all evil people and evil characters. And Anne Rice sort of like brought this new dimension to vampires that sort of changed the way that we look at vampires.
Now they're like
then there's True Blood and, you know,
Twilight, where they're vegetarians, right?
True Blood? Yeah.
No, Twilight. In Twilight, that's what they called themselves because they didn't eat human blood.
Yeah, Twilight also changed because it started bringing all the teens into it, and so actually they drink cow's blood.
Yeah, that's why they call themselves vegetarians. Yeah.
I've never seen the movies. Wait, they're vegetarians because why?
They drink cow's blood, not human blood, to survive. Cow, like not human. So that's the vegetarian part.
So they consider themselves vegetarian because they're not drinking human's blood. They're drinking like cow's blood. But in True Blood, they have synthetic blood, right?
Yeah. Interesting. Jennifer, are you more a zombie or vampire person?
Shoot, I think I've probably seen more zombie movies. And I remember, like, I used to think, like, as a kid, I think because that was before Interview with the Vampire, which I'd seen in maybe middle school. Was it early high school? I'm trying to remember when it came out. But I remember once I saw Interview with the Vampire, exactly, I thought vampires were cool. Because before that, I just think of like, I mean, I had seen Christopher Lee's Dracula movies, but they were old, like, you know, before I was born, and my dad made me, you have to watch the Christopher Lee Dracula, you know? And I always, like, when I was watching old movies, I was like, oh, this is like my dad's movie. So it was like, had a semi less cool vibe, just being like a preteen or child thinking, you know, too cool for school. So I remember, like, I guess avoiding vampire, like wanting to watch vampire movies or anything vampirish because I thought it was kind of corny. And then Interview with the Vampire made it like sexy. Even though I'm looking at Christopher Lee in these two movies we've watched now, Dracula A.D. and Count Dracula, he's very sexy in these movies.
Yeah. So again, like I thought, so I think another interesting movie that we're gonna watch is Near Dark, because Near Dark also was actually the first movie that also brought the kind of like rock vibe to the vampire kind of like era. That they're like a modern vampires. They're not like, you know, a Dracula. They're not Anne Rice's vampire. They're just kind of like modern white trash vampires. So I mean, Catherine Bigelow is kind of interesting that way because she also brings in a different kind of like a discourse into the genre.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch that one. I've heard so much about it, and it was hard to find, yet you have a copy.
Yeah.
Right, Quentin, so we're going to be watching that on our next, guys. Yeah.
We'll be watching it in person too. But Quentin, I I'm curious about you. Are you more of a vampire or zombie person?
I think I am both. I think that the difference between zombies and vampires to me is that vampires came from a romantic legend, right? It's a literary figure, whereas zombies is really just a cinematic figure created by, Night of the Living Dead. So Night of the Living Dead, the White Zombie I've never seen, but the Night of the Living Dead is the one movie that in 1969 that kicked off the whole genre of zombies, by George A. Romero. And then somehow Night of the Living Dead, I think it's supposed to be a little bit more supernatural because it's like these kind of people rising, these ghouls rising from the grave. But with Dawn of the Dead, it's sort of like, it pushes zombie towards basically kind of more medical, viral type of like environment. But recently I've seen The Strain. Is actually very interesting because The Strain, it's Guillermo del Toro. Yeah, they got both. It's both like it's this ancient strain of like a virus that is perpetuated by this vampire, these kind of master's vampires that lived for a long time. So that's also is kind of interesting.
Yeah. I'm more of a zombie person, but I always find it interesting that they always say that when a Republican is president, zombies are more popular, and when a Democrat is in the White House, that the vampires are vampire flicks rule apparently.
Why? Who says that?
That's a thing that's always been around.
Yeah.
I'm looking at it now, but there's been like articles about that.
So zombieism is a lot. It's about that fear of losing the white identity, which is Richard Dye wrote an essay a long time ago on Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead. So the whole idea of that, it's about like how zombies is created by Americans basically. So in some way there's this anxiety of like, you losing that whiteness, that humanity that becomes these people that are like whatever. So it's that kind of like a little kind of like a white people's panic kind of thing. It's what zombie movies are about, and that's why they're very popular in general because
Jennifer, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, it almost sounds like a white supremacist sort of like like what is that called? Like the genocide. Whites worried about their race being wiped out. It sounds a little, I didn't know that.
You think about it, it's very kind of like the whole zombie stuff mostly is very white trashy. It's just like people sitting on the, stationing on the property, even Dawn of the Dead, right? In Pittsburgh, they station on the thing and they're just shooting these people down. Think about that. What reminds you more about America than there's like this guy who's trying to defend their turf and their humanity by having to just randomly shoots down these people that have no humanity, was zombies, right? So I'm just saying that it's not necessarily racist per se, but it's playing with that anxiety. So that's why it makes more sense that during Republican era, because again, like you look at how the Republican platform is run on is to, because I heard this interview talking about Trump, and Trump basically is saying that he realized that, well, fear is much more compelling than hope, right? Obama's hope. Fear is more compelling. So in some way that's why he creates this fear against immigrants and against like, the kind of like violation of whiteness or the kind of like, whiteness being wiping out. So of course, zombie movies are going to be popular because it's all zombie movies play on that anxiety, right?
Yeah, well, if you just think about a horde of people coming towards you, that's like the horde of immigrants or a horde of whatever bad things you have.
But then not necessarily horror, but horror of people.
Oh, no, horror.
Horde of people,
like a big group of people coming towards you and trying to kill you and your family and your way of life.
Yeah. So it's very much that anxiety,
Yeah. But Jennifer, I want to go back.
Sorry. I think if Trump wins again, then you do vampires, right? Then you do zombies.
But I want to go back to what Jennifer said about Christopher Lee being hot. He's not hot, dude. He's an old dude. Are you really serious that you think he's hot?
Well, maybe I don't think he's hot, but I find that his performance and his embodiment of this character is very sexy. Like he makes it very sensual and sexy because he just stares at his victims and seduces them with his eyes. And he's tall and masculine and
So that's
But
all.
Dracula is always supposed to be sexy, though. I mean, the whole vampire genre is supposed to be sexy.
It is, right? But the other one, the Bela Lugosi, I don't know. He wasn't as sexy to me, but I think I've only seen like one of his movies or clips or something. But I just was like, because like I said, I'd seen some Christopher Lee Dracula movie or two when I was a kid, and maybe because you're not thinking about stuff like that when you're a child, right? So then, but as a woman now, I'm watching it, I'm like, ooh, I would want to be seduced by me. That's what I would want. I would give in because it's just that's what I was like. Ooh, fun.
when this whole COVID thing is over and I could be in a bar again, should I just like stare at a woman and offer to bite them? Would that work?
I think the mysterious, confident stare, but not like a creepy stare, but like you don't. But like, yeah, you kind of like cool, effortlessly cool, and like. And then when you do look at them, like you're like undressing them with your eyes, but not in a creepy way. I don't know.
but isn't Dracula always supposed to have like a hypnotic kind of look, right?
Yeah.
So that I think that's written in the novel that he has this hypnotic look that he can actually hypnotize you or something. I don't know.
So that means Christopher Lee is honoring the novel, right?
Yeah.
Koji,
so.
like the source material, he's supposed to be sexy, so I would hope.
Be sexy.
But again, like James Bond is supposed to be sexy, right? But do we find him, I mean, like he's not like everybody, not as like him, but he is supposed to be this sexy kind of like character, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, Quentin, so what is your favorite vampire movie of all time?
I think actually it has to be Near Dark or Interview with the Vampire. I really like Interview with the Vampire. I thought it was a really well done movie.
Jennifer, what's your favorite vampire movie?
I was on mute. I have to think about that. It's a great question. I'm trying to think of ones. Interview with a Vampire is pretty classic, huh? I'm just going to Google vampire movies because I feel like there's one that I must have loved, that I've seen that I loved.
The other one that I really like is actually Abel Ferrara's Addiction. So it's actually a pretty cool movie. It's a very intellectual movie, vampire movie. It's about like Lily Taylor plays like a graduate student and she was bitten by a vampire and then she sort of turns into this vampire, but it's a little bit equate. Like it's about like, vampirism is kind of like addiction to drugs. So it's shot in black and white and it's actually worth a look. So maybe you should see that next time with Near Dark because addiction is like another new rendition of vampirism, but in a more kind of like intellectual way.
Yeah. I was gonna say I think I found the movie, guys, because I just had to get my memory jogged. I think I always said I loved From Dusk Till Dawn a ton, and that's considered a vampire movie.
Yeah, From Dusk Till Dawn is about vampire, but yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Right? Maybe that one. That's what I would say. Yeah. What about you, Coach?
I don't think I've ever, I've seen Interview with the Vampire, but I might have been too young when I saw it because I don't remember it that well, and it didn't really stay in my mind as something I really love. So I'm gonna have to rewatch that at some point soon. But I think I've never really loved vampires. Actually, I've never really been into vampires at all. I think
you're not a romantic person. That's fine.
I like True Blood, maybe. True Blood, I really like that show. And, I like Strain a lot. I like the first couple episodes of Strain. I read the books about Strain. But I think Twilight recently has killed every instinct of anything I like about vampires because I hated that book and I hated those movies.
Well, I heard the book was really good because actually one of my manager has that book a long time ago and he actually was trying to ask this company to option it, but then they didn't. And so she told me that story quite a while ago about Twilight, but then at the end later on, somebody else ended up making it.
I hated films. I've read all 5 books and I think they're terrible. But for some reason I read all 5 of them. But I think they're
read all of them.
But I thought the books were better than the movie.
Oh yeah, that's true. But the books, Stephanie Meyer is probably one of my least favorite authors of all time. My biggest critique of Twilight was that the woman was basically useless and she had no redeeming qualities about her. She wasn't smart, she wasn't brave. Pretty much all she wanted to do is get pregnant by the vampire dude. And
No,
also,
but that's also like you look at that's how romance is like, right? I mean, it's also
yeah,
she's writing to basically a middle American or whatever average
well,
kind of
Mormon.
girl who's kind of lonely,
She's pushing
right?
her Mormon agenda, I think. Of
No,
like
but the men is like extraordinary. Like you have beauty. Like the point of view is from like a very kind of like beautiful, like a random, okay
normal
looking
girl.
normal girl, and then this vampire comes in and takes you away. So it's very much in that kind of like a teen, but it's like that Harlequin romance kind of genre. So I'm sure like as a man you're not the audience for that, right?
But I mean, but even like Hunger Games, I mean, Katniss was the most like she's really brave. Maybe not the brightest, but she was really brave and strong. And in Harry Potter, Hermione was like the smartest girl, and maybe not the bravest but she was like I think that I just wanted a female character who had something that was extraordinary about her. But I would like if I had a daughter, I'd never let her read that book because I think those books could make her.
No, because most women who reads romance is like women that just kind of like whatever. It's like and they are though I mean she's writing to that audience where
True.
they are these kind of like ordinary people that has whatever. And then extraordinary men comes and sweep them off the feet, So
like some chivalry, being submissive, that kind of fantasy.
It's very much like Harlequin romance. Like you would not like, and nobody would,
Wait.
like it is.
Brontes aren't Harlequin romance, right? That's not a consideration.
Broadway?
No. Bronte.
No, Harlequin romance is it's a brand that started in I think the 50s, 60s or something like modern. Isn't Bronte from like 1800s?
19th century, yeah. So it's more of like
Harlequin is a brand. It's a modern brand. Charles Bronte, it's a long time ago.
Do they have stories where normal men get taken by extraordinary women?
Normal men get taken by because men don't read those kind of narratives. I mean, boys read Harry Potter. That's the kind of narrative they would read, and
I want to be taken by an extraordinary woman.
But Jane Eyre, for example, was in some ways a very feminist work.
Yeah. Jane
Eyre is basically about this girl, and she literally has gone through all these kind of like tragic men that always screwed her over, right? And then so that's why I mean, for me, Jane Eyre has always been kind of extraordinary. It's a gothic literature, right? It's extraordinary gothic literature.
Bronte is a gothic literature.
Yeah, Harlequin romance is not. Harlequin romance is like a brand created in the 60s or 70s for American romance readers.
Interesting.
I like those.
And again, like there's this new genre. I'm not sure you know about yayoi, right? Yayoi is basically these boy love story in Japan that's created for women who want to see men falling in love, like usually older men, a younger boy. And then they kind of like, it's kind of like a weird genre too. So romance is like a really strange genre.
Jennifer, what were you going to say?
Well, I wanted to ask, you said that genre, the one in Japan, it's an older man, young boy love, and women like to read it?
Yes.
Very cool. And then, the Harlequin romance, is that like those corny little romance novels that you see with like the woman like thrown back and the man like this, and it's like you see them at like Walmart's and Kmart.
Yes, those are Harlequin romance.
My aunt reads those.
It's kind of Danielle Steele is was sort of the person kind of a borderline said Harlequin romance, but Danielle Steele is a little bit like less. It's
an elevated version of it.
A little bit elevated, but it's not really.
I've read a couple of Danielle Steele books. But she wrote one about the internment camps.
Oh, really? Wow.
She wrote a love story around internment camps. I remember reading that, and then I read another.
Good?
No, I mean, no, it wasn't good. But I read a couple of Danielle Steele books. I actually am the audience for Twilight, so I've read a lot of these things. I just found it not interesting. I guess maybe it's just me. But I think we're nearing the end of the show. Do you guys have anything else you want to say about Dracula A.D.?
Yeah, I think it's worth a pop once, one of those movies. I don't think there's enough in there for a rewatch sort of thing, unless you're doing some research, like kind of we are on some Dracula movies. But anybody that's like an Anglophile or loves, a period piece set in the 70s, you would be very satisfied by those two aspects, I think.
Yeah, which is funny because I think ironically it was supposed to be a modernization of Dracula legend, but now that it became a period piece kind of thing. But I think that the like, Hammer films, the costume looks pretty good. Like, everything is like, it's not cheesy, because you look at some cheesy 70s horror, exploitation movies, they're like, everything's really badly done, but I think it's a recently well-made movie.
Yeah. And I agree with all that. I think it's a fun movie to watch, especially if you've never seen it before, because it really talks a lot about the Dracula mythology, especially if you don't know much about it. And I was amazed it's the first time Dracula was brought to the modern age. So I think that's pretty cool. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on, and thank you everybody for listening. Please rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast. And the one thing I'll ask of everybody is to please tell one friend about Midnight Watchers. And if you know of a midnight movie that we should be watching, please let us know. Come to our Facebook or Instagram. We're at Midnight Watchers Pod at both, and leave us a message and we'll be happy to watch it. So thank you guys. Bye.
Bye.